All right. Hi, my name is Josh, and I'm here with one of the founders of Flat Point Capital. And we're just gonna sort of ask you a couple questions.
Sounds
Um,
great. Sounds great. Thanks for having me on, Josh. Really appreciate it. Your
yeah, of
audience
course, man.
is so big. It's really just a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you in the studio. So, first question for everybody who's at home listening: what is Flat Point Capital? You tell us a little bit more about that.
Very good question. So Platpoint Capital originally started as just a traditional commercial brokerage. Um, However, our project now, and what we've done for the past couple of years is we really took commercial brokering and we automated the system. So before we before we did this, before we introduced the fintech sphere and different sort of technological advances to brokering, essentially the way that the debt process worked was very inefficient. So the broker would have to go recruit borrowers. The lender would also be trying to market to borrowers, and really you had this whole scheme of things, this whole cycle that was very inefficient. When the broker would get a deal in from a borrower, they would send it to maybe one or two lenders that they thought off the top of their head would fit the project and fit its needs. So what we did essentially is we came in and we realized that there existed this really unique opportunity for us to take what was traditional commercial real estate brokering and create a system in which borrowers can apply online when they have projects. And then what happens is it references our internal database filled with lenders, and it matches up the specific lenders that are lending on the properties that are being proposed from the borrowers. So it pairs these lenders and borrowers. It does the exact same thing that a broker was doing. It just makes it a lot easier. And borrowers are getting more and more term sheets. We see at each project we send it to about 50 to 100 lenders, which 3 years ago, if you asked a broker how many lenders they sent packages to, it was only about 5 or 10, like I talked about before. So borrowers are getting more term sheets, lenders are getting more deal flow. So it's really just been a very successful run, and it's been great.
That's awesome. That's great to hear, man. Well, I'm really curious. What does the sort of like competitive ecosystem look like? Have you looked into your SWAT or Pastoral at all?
Yeah, we have. So that's a really good question. We spend a lot of time internally thinking about this, and internally talking about it as well. In the market, especially here in Denver, we've really established ourselves as the go-to for alternative debt. Our interface is really easy to use, which is one of the things that separates us from the competitors. Before it was a lot of companies like this tried to do it, but they struggled in the initial onboarding process of clients. So where we offer a free service that borrowers can just come on and use, they do have to go through a profiling background and all that because we don't want to spam the lenders. But the interface it's so simple that our customer acquisition has been honestly one of the easiest things that we've had to do, which was crazy when we realized that.
Totally.
In addition to that, specifically with the pestle stuff, politically and legally, real estate is always changing.
Totally.
And especially with licenses, we had some big issues getting licensed in states like Nevada. Brokering deals in states like Nevada after 2008, it's very hard because there's so many strict regulations on it. But we really defined our market, and we worked at it. We went there, we flew there, we spent time there. We made it happen, and so now we're actually licensed in all 50 states to legally broker both commercial and residential debt, and that for us is huge.
Congratulations, man. That's a big deal.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been quite a run, but here we are. And so that being said, legal factors are always changing.
Totally.
And markets are always filling up, bubbles are being created. So we, as a company, do have to be very cautious in what we're doing. For a while, we were thinking about doing some warehouse lending, which is essentially, if you're not familiar with warehouse lending, it's where you lend someone else's money, but you're on the line for the debt, essentially.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of times what happens is we'll lend that money out, and then we securitize the debt and sell it on the secondary market, which it can get a little dangerous. So we've been trying to steer clear from it more than we had in the past. But yeah, it's a really interesting time, and there's so many things that are changing.
So with so many things changing, what types of pivots have you had to deal with in the past? Like what types of
good question.
Ecosystem changes?
Good question. So originally we started as a not traditional, but just a straight up brokerage. Okay, and so it was this automated system online, but it still did the exact same purpose of a broker. What we found out is that in the process, we were, we kind of had this dual pronged approach where it was our personal touch on things, because you need that. You do need that in real estate because they're big projects. Borrowers need that assurance. So having a helping hand really gets the job done. And it's hard to do it completely automated. What we found out, however, is that it wasn't necessarily us that needed to have the helping hand. So what we ended up doing is we actually white labeled the software to lenders directly once we already had established relationships with them. So by doing that, we decrease our overhead costs because we weren't having to service those brokers or the borrowers or the lenders because we let the lenders do it in-house.
Totally.
And so for the lenders, they love that because they can see the deal flow, and they have this great portal that they can work from directly. The borrowers love it as well, because they can communicate directly with the lender and they don't have to deal with us. That being said, obviously we have them under consulting services agreements,
Totally.
non-disclosure agreements, and so we're still involved in the process because of the software that we created, but we created it in a scalable manner. At the beginning we were doing stuff that obviously wasn't scalable. But
that's the way you got to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
How did people react? Like, what was the traction?
It was tough. It was
scale.
really tough at the beginning, especially with brokers, because this industry is so old that almost everyone has been in it for 20 to 30 years, or at least everyone that's at the top now. And so it was hard for brokers to catch on. What we actually have ended up doing in a couple circumstances is actually white labeling the software to brokers themselves, and then they have acquired lenders. And so what we do there is we do a split payment process, and so we essentially take half of the points, what we usually would, but then on our end, we're not having to do any marketing. So initially, back to the question, it was very hard for brokers to get on board, and we hit some roadblocks there, but once we got them in the loop and got them on our side, they actually started to adopt the technology. They realized how effective it was. They started to import their own lender databases and pair it up with the one that we had. And so, it's been a really interesting process. In doing so, we've made some great connections, and we've come really far. But it has been tough. There's
Totally.
been times.
Well, what are sort of like the next steps going from like the traction you have gotten moving forward? Like, where do you see the company going in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. We're worried about that all the time, especially with, like I was talking about, how changing the political atmosphere of real estate is. Now that Kanye West is president, I think that his policies will be similar to Trump in the capitalistic sense. So I think that there's a lot that we'll be able to do in commercial real estate for years to come. We are trying to get more physical assets. So you look at companies like Uber and Airbnb, and over the past few years they've tried to do this as well, where they really get physical assets to back up their name. And we're trying to do that, so we're trying to get more involved in real estate projects, lending our own money, and some warehouse lending like I was talking about. But, I think that overall for the next 5 to 10 years, we should have a good economic atmosphere. In terms of occupancy and availability of residential stuff, it's different, and it varies there based on the city. Since we are nationwide, it's hard to really pinpoint it, but overall it looks to be growing, and the activity in those markets is thriving. So I'm not too worried about it, but I'm cautiously optimistic is what I'll say.
Cautiously optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. All right. Well, everybody, this has been Luke
Thank
over
you.
at Flat Point Capital.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks for
Appreciate
coming on the
it.
show,
Thanks
man.
for having me.
And next up, we have cats or dogs. Which is the better animal for your home?
I'll be tuning in for that one.
Yeah.
Be tuning in for that one. Thanks,
All right.
Josh.